The Nevada sun spilled through the blinds, painting gold streaks across the worn wooden floor of my small house on the outskirts of Carson City. It was Father's Day, and for the first time in years, I'd woken up before dawn, not because of habit, but because of hope. My son Daniel had promised to stop by after lunch. "Got something special for you, Dad," he'd said earlier in the week, his voice quick, rehearsed, the kind of tone that left me both excited and uneasy. I spent the morning cleaning. Old habits die hard. I polished the coffee table, dusted Ellen's photo, my late wife, gone 12 years now, and brewed a fresh pot of coffee. The house smelled of pine cleaner and roasted beans, my small attempt to make it feel like home again. I laid out 2 cups, like I always did, one for me and one for her. It was a silly ritual maybe, but it kept me grounded. When the doorbell finally rang, my heart jumped. I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened the door. There they were, Daniel and his wife Melissa, standing on the porch like they were posing for a magazine. Daniel looked sharp in his navy jacket, his hair slicked back, the expensive kind of cologne filling the doorway before they even stepped in. Melissa wore a beige dress and heels too high for the cracked walkway outside my house. Her smile was polite, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Dad," Daniel said, leaning in for a quick hug that lasted barely a second. "Happy Father's Day." He handed me a small paper bag, the kind you'd get from a gas station or maybe a discount store. It was crumpled on one side. No ribbon, no card. Melissa stood behind him, her arms crossed, already glancing at her phone. "Well, thank you, son," I said, forcing warmth into my voice. I took the bag, feeling its weight light, almost empty. "Go on, open it," Daniel said, his smile tight. I reached inside and pulled out a pair of gray socks, still with the $6.99 price tag attached. The brand name was one I'd seen at the local grocery store, next to the clearance shelf. Melissa gave a little laugh. "He picked those himself," she said. "He said you like practical things." I nodded slowly, turning the socks over in my hands. "Practical, yes," I said. "Always useful." Daniel grinned, relieved. "See? I told you he'd appreciate it. I remember you used to say there's no point wasting money on fancy stuff." "I did," I said quietly. "Back when we had to stretch every dollar." The air in the room tightened. Melissa changed the subject. "We can't stay long," she said. "We have dinner with my parents in Reno tonight. Dad's hosting something at the country club." Her words stung in ways I didn't let show. They'd only been married 4 years. But Charles Grant, her father, already had a bigger piece of Daniel's heart than I did. I'd seen it happening in small ways. The way Daniel's tone changed when he spoke about Charles's advice. The way he called him "sir" with pride. "Dinner with your folks," I said, pouring coffee into the cups. "That sounds nice." Melissa smiled thinly. "Oh, it's just family. You know how he is." I nodded again, pretending I didn't understand, though I understood perfectly. They stayed maybe 15 minutes. Daniel drank half his coffee, checked his watch twice, then stood. "We should go, Dad," he said. "Got to beat the traffic." I walked them to the door, the pair of socks still in my hand. "Drive safe," I said. Melissa gave a little wave. "Enjoy your gift." When the door closed behind them, the silence came rushing back, heavy and sharp. I stared at the socks for a long time, then placed them on the coffee table beside Ellen's photo. Her smiling face seemed to ask a question I didn't want to answer. I sat down and took a sip of coffee gone cold. Outside, the wind kicked up dust across the yard, rattling the wind chime she'd hung there years ago. I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe it was just a thoughtless gift. Maybe they were busy, distracted, young. But that night, when I scrolled through my phone before bed, the breath caught in my chest. On Melissa's social media, there it was, a picture of her father, Charles Grant, sitting at a dinner table under chandelier light, his wrist gleaming with a brand new Rolex. The caption read, "To the best father-in-law in the world. You've done so much for us, you deserve the best." And below that, a tag, Gift from Daniel and Melissa. The room went still. My pulse roared in my ears. I zoomed in on the photo, the same model I'd seen in store windows for nearly $12,000. I remembered 2 months ago Daniel's voice on the phone. Urgent. Dad, the roof's leaking. I need help right away. Can you send $12,000? I'll pay you back as soon as I get my bonus. I hadn't hesitated. I'd wired the money that same afternoon. Now, the truth stared back at me in pixels and gold. My son had taken my savings, my trust, and wrapped it around another man's wrist. The pair of socks sat quietly on the table, the $6.99 tag dangling like a joke the universe forgot to laugh at. In the stillness, I could almost hear Ellen's voice, gentle, patient, echoing from memory. Sam, you can forgive mistakes, but never let someone mistake your love for weakness. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the desert wind carry sand across the empty road, and somewhere deep inside, something old and heavy began to shift. It wasn't anger yet, it was clarity, the kind that comes right before a storm. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, my mind still tangled in the image of that gold watch. The air inside the house felt heavier than usual, like the silence itself was pressing down on my chest. I made coffee, but it tasted bitter. Everything did. I sat at the kitchen table, the socks still folded neatly beside me, and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I finally typed in my bank's website. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Impatient. When the account loaded, my stomach tightened. There it was, a transaction from exactly 8 weeks ago. Transfer to D. Hayes. Amount $12,000. Note, roof repair emergency. But scrolling further, I found something that stopped me cold. The next day, another charge, Aerodyne jewelry and timepieces, Reno, $11,985. My throat went dry. He hadn't even tried to hide it. I stared at the numbers, at the dates, at the proof of betrayal sitting so neatly in black and white. For 20 minutes, I couldn't move. Then I picked up the phone. It rang 4 times before Daniel answered, his voice smooth and calm, like nothing was wrong. Hey, Dad. Morning. Everything okay? I checked my bank, I said, keeping my tone as even as I could. You said you needed that money for the roof. There was a pause too short for guilt, too long for innocence. Then he laughed lightly. Oh, that. Yeah, about that. Melissa's dad helped us out, so I used your transfer for something else. Don't worry, I'll pay you back soon. Something else, I repeated, my voice quiet. A watch, Daniel? Another pause. Then his tone shifted, sharp and defensive. Look, Dad, don't make a big deal out of this. It was a gift. You wouldn't understand. Mr. Grant has done more for my career than anyone. I had to show some appreciation. I felt my pulse thudding in my ears. With my money. He sighed, as if I were a child interrupting him. Come on, it's not like you're struggling. You never spend anything. And it's just money, right? Just money. 2 words that made the room tilt. Daniel, I said softly, trying to keep my composure. Your mother and I worked 40 years for that just money. Every cent we saved, we did for you. His voice hardened. I know, and I'm grateful, okay? But things are different now. I'm building connections that matter. You wouldn't understand what it takes to stay ahead. The words hit like stones. You wouldn't understand. The same phrase he'd used at 16, when I'd told him hard work mattered more than appearances. I thought he'd grown past that arrogance. I was wrong. I wanted to yell, to remind him who had paid for his college, his first apartment, the down payment on his house. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I realized yelling wouldn't fix what was already broken. So I said only one thing. You disappointed me, son. He didn't reply. The line went quiet. Then, after a long breath, he said coldly, if that's how you feel, Maybe we should take a break from talking for a while. And then he hung up. I sat there, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I didn't cry. I didn't even move. I just stared out the window at the desert beyond my porch, the horizon glowing faintly pink. The morning felt endless. At noon, as I tried to distract myself by fixing the fence, my phone buzzed with a message. No name, just a number. He's not who you think he is. I frowned, wiping sweat from my forehead. Another text followed seconds later. Check the files under Hayes Holdings. He's using your name. Don't trust him. My heart started pounding. Hayes Holdings, that was the name of the small repair shop I'd closed 15 years ago. The tax ID and banking information were still active, but I hadn't touched them since Ellen's death. I opened my old filing cabinet inside the workshop, the metal drawers screeching from rust. Inside, among dusty folders, was an envelope from the State Revenue Office. It was stamped 3 weeks ago. Inside were documents, business renewal forms, with my forged signature. I traced the fake signature with my thumb. The handwriting was Daniel's. The room spun. My son hadn't just taken my money, he'd taken my name. I sat down hard on the old stool, the wood creaking beneath me. Outside, the wind howled across the dry Nevada ground, carrying sand against the windows. I thought of Ellen again, of her words from years ago when Daniel had once lied about breaking a neighbor's window. If you cover for him now, he'll learn that truth is optional. She'd been right then. She was right now. I folded the papers, slipped them into my jacket, and whispered to the empty room, "All right, son. Let's see how deep this hole goes." The wind answered back, rattling the loose roof tiles above me, a roof that, ironically, had never needed repair. By dawn the next morning, I was already on the highway to Reno. The desert stretched endlessly around me, the sun just beginning to rise behind the Sierra Nevada mountains. The radio murmured low, but I wasn't really listening. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. Every mile that passed, the anger inside me cooled, not fading, but sharpening into focus. Reno wasn't far, just an hour's drive from Carson City, but it felt like another world. Steel and glass towers replaced dust and quiet streets. Daniel had mentioned before that his father-in-law, Charles Grant, kept his company headquarters downtown. I parked across from the building, a sleek silver tower with the name Grant Development Group etched into the marble entrance. For a moment, I almost turned back. Part of me still wanted to believe Daniel had made some mistake, something explainable. But then I felt the folded papers in my jacket, the forged signature, my own name stolen, and the hesitation vanished. Inside, the air was cool and sharp with the smell of money, polished floors, white orchids on every table, and young people in suits walking briskly with purpose. I must have looked out of place in my denim jacket and work boots. A receptionist glanced up from behind her counter, her professional smile flickering just a little. "Good morning, sir. Can I help you?" "I'm here about an invoice from Hayes Holdings," I said, steadying my voice. "I just need to confirm a few things about recent work with your company." She frowned slightly, typing quickly. "Hayes Holdings? Let me check." While she searched, I noticed a familiar voice echoing from a nearby hallway, Daniel's voice. Smooth, confident, rehearsed. He was standing just inside a glass-walled meeting room, talking to a man in a gray suit. "I'm telling you," Daniel said, laughing lightly. "Hayes Holdings is one of our oldest subcontractors. Reliable, cheap, and no questions asked." The man nodded, flipping through papers. "And your father, he's on board with all this?" Daniel smiled. "Completely. He's retired now, trusts me to handle everything. It's practically my company at this point." The words hit me like a hammer. My throat tightened. Every syllable from his mouth twisted deeper into my chest. I stepped behind a marble pillar, heart pounding. I could see him through the glass, his face animated, confident. He looked proud of using me as a cover. The older man nodded. "Good. We'll need another transfer soon. Probably double the last one. If the inspectors start asking questions, you'll handle it? Daniel's grin didn't waver. Of course, the accounts are in his name. Nobody will dig that deep. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My son, my only child, had built his success on my reputation, my name, my trust. The receptionist's voice broke through my fog. Sir? She said, looking up. There's a note here saying that Hayes Holdings processed 3 contracts in the last quarter. All payments went through the company's account, ending in 0441. That's correct? 441. That was the old account I'd opened 20 years ago for my repair shop. I hadn't touched it since Ellen died. Could I get a copy of those invoices? I asked quietly. She hesitated. I'm afraid that's confidential, sir. I forced a small, polite smile. Of course. Thank you anyway. Outside, the Nevada air felt hotter than before. The sky had deepened to a burning blue. I leaned against my truck, the sound of traffic filling the silence in my head. Through the glass windows above, I could still see Daniel, gesturing as he spoke to the man in the gray suit. He looked so much like his mother when he smiled, but Ellen's smile had always been kind. His was sharp, practiced, cold. A group of employees passed by, laughing about a company dinner that evening. Charles Grant's bringing his son-in-law, one said. Big announcement or something. Charles Grant, Daniel's meal ticket. My son was digging himself deeper into a hole built on lies and using me as the shovel. I sat in the truck for a long time, trying to calm the tremor in my hands. My mind replayed Daniel's words. No one will dig that deep. I opened the glove compartment, pulling out the worn leather notebook Ellen had given me years ago. Inside were old business records, receipts, notes. I flipped to a blank page and started writing down everything I'd heard, names, dates, phrases. If Daniel thought no one would dig, he was about to be proven wrong. I drove away from the tower, the reflection of its glass facade shrinking in my rearview mirror. The road back toward Carson City shimmered under the desert heat, but my focus was clear now. Whatever he was hiding, I was going to find it. Not because I wanted revenge, but because the man who raised him, the man Ellen believed in, deserved the truth. That night, I couldn't bring myself to go home. I parked my truck behind an old diner on the edge of Reno, where the neon sign buzzed in and out like a dying heartbeat. The air smelled of coffee and motor oil, comforting, in a strange way. I sat in the cab with the engine off, staring at the invoices I'd scribbled in my notebook. 3 contracts, all under my name, all signed within the last 6 months. The longer I looked at them, the more the handwriting burned itself into my mind. It was Daniel's. My son had forged my signature with the same steady hand I'd once guided over his first homework sheet. I ran a hand over my face. It wasn't just money anymore, it was identity, reputation, trust. If anyone from the IRS or the state checked those forms, they wouldn't come knocking on Daniel's door. They'd come for me. I needed help. That's when I thought of Rachel Bloom. She'd been Ellen's closest friend, sharp, loyal, and stubborn as hell. We'd lost touch after Ellen passed, but I'd heard she became one of the best small business lawyers in Carson City. I dug out her number from an old address book, my handwriting shaky from time and regret, and dialed. Bloom Law Office, this is Rachel. Her voice hadn't changed, still strong, still carrying that calm certainty I remembered. Rachel, I said softly. It's Sam Hayes. There was a pause, then a surprised laugh. Sam? Lord, it's been years. How are you? I've been better, I said. I need your help, and I wouldn't call if it wasn't serious. Within 2 hours, I was sitting in her office, a small, cluttered room lined with case files and old framed photos of her dog. Rachel looked older, but only in the way people do when they've lived fully. Her eyes were as sharp as ever. She poured 2 mugs of coffee and gestured for me to start talking. When I finished, she leaned back, arms crossed. He used your name on corporate contracts? Yes, I said, sliding the forged documents across her desk. And he's tied to Grant Development. I heard him in their office today bragging about it. He's got fake accounts in my name. I don't even know how deep this goes. Rachel studied the papers, her brow furrowing. You realize if this gets audited, the IRS will come for you first. Your name's on the paperwork. I nodded. That's what I'm afraid of. She flipped through the papers again, her lawyer's instincts kicking in. All right, we'll start by pulling the registration data for Hayes Holdings. If he reactivated your business license, there'll be digital traces, emails, signatures, payment methods. I can subpoena that if needed. She looked up, meeting my eyes. Sam, this isn't small-time stuff. If he's using your identity to launder money, we might be talking fraud charges against him, maybe even his father-in-law. I rubbed my temples. Rachel, he's my son. Her voice softened. I know, and that's exactly why you can't cover for him. I swallowed hard, the words landing like stones. She was right. Ellen would have said the same. Rachel turned her laptop toward me. Here, look at this. On the State Business Registry, Hayes Holdings LLC had been reactivated 3 months ago. The digital signature matched Daniel's email address, but the owner of record was still listed as me. The most recent filing listed over $380,000 in vendor payments money that never touched my account. My chest tightened. Where's the money now? She clicked again, opening a trail of transfers that led to a shell account under a company called Silverfield Consulting. The registered address was a penthouse apartment in downtown Reno. Rachel arched an eyebrow. Silverfield belongs to your son's wife, Melissa Hayes. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Rachel leaned forward, voice low and steady. They're laundering the money together, Sam. Your son's covering the tracks through your old business, and Melissa's funneling the funds through her company. If you stay silent, you'll go down with them. I stared at the glowing screen, the lines of numbers and names blurring. My mind flashed back to Daniel as a boy, sitting at our kitchen table, showing me his first A+ report card. He'd been so proud, so earnest. When did it all go wrong? I whispered. Rachel reached across the desk, her hand firm on mine. It went wrong when he learned you'd always bail him out. Don't let him teach you that lesson twice. I looked at her, then at Ellen's old ring on my finger, the only thing I still wore every day. What do I do, Rachel? She took a deep breath. We gather evidence. We get a statement from Grant's company, trace the transfers, and make sure you're legally protected. But Sam? Yes? Her eyes met mine, unwavering. Before this ends, you're going to have to decide whether you want to save your son or stop him. For a long moment, I didn't speak. The only sound was the ticking clock on her wall, steady and unrelenting. Then I said quietly, if stopping him is the only way to save him, then that's what I'll do. Rachel nodded, her expression softening. Ellen would be proud of you. I looked out the window toward the dim lights of Carson City, flickering beyond the desert. Somewhere in that glittering distance, my son was living a lie, built on my name. And now, I had a reason to tear it all down. Rachel's office lights burned late into the night as we built our plan. Her laptop glowed between us, the files we'd gathered forming a web of lies that all pointed back to Daniel and Melissa. The transactions, the fake contracts, the shell company, it was all there, neatly recorded like a confession written in numbers. Tomorrow night, Rachel said, closing the folder, Grant Development Group is hosting their 20th anniversary gala. Black tie, private guest list, big donors, press. Daniel's scheduled to give a speech alongside his father-in-law. Her tone was calm, but her eyes burned with purpose. That's where this ends. I stared at the printed invitation she'd managed to get from a contact in the event staff. The gold letters shimmered under the light, honoring vision, celebrating family. The irony stung. I can't humiliate him like that, I muttered. Not in front of everyone. Rachel leaned forward, her voice low. "Sam, listen to me. He's been humiliating you quietly for years. You're just bringing it into the light." I said nothing for a while. The clock on her wall ticked louder, with every passing second. Finally, I nodded. "All right, let's do it." The next evening, I stood outside the Silver Crest Hotel, the venue glowing under chandeliers and cameras. Expensive cars pulled up one after another. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns glided through the revolving doors like a parade of privilege. I tugged at my old suit jacket. It wasn't fancy dark gray, clean, pressed, but it had history. It was the same one I'd worn to Daniel's college graduation, the day I thought I was witnessing the start of his bright future. Rachel met me near the entrance, her sharp black dress and calm presence grounding me. "You ready?" she asked. "Not really," I said, "but I'm here." We entered just as the host announced the dinner's start. The ballroom shimmered with golden light and crystal glasses. A jazz quartet played softly in the corner. Waiters moved like clockwork between tables, and laughter floated above the clinking of silverware. I scanned the crowd. Daniel stood near the stage beside Charles Grant. He looked confident, polished, the picture of success. When his gaze swept across the room and landed on me, the smile froze on his face. For a second, I saw fear. Then it vanished behind the same practiced grin he always wore. He whispered something to Melissa, who turned and spotted me too. Her expression hardened instantly. Rachel touched my arm. "Stay calm. Wait for your cue." The speeches began, first the CEO, then Charles, boasting about his company's growth and the importance of family loyalty. The words sounded like poison dressed in poetry. Then came Daniel's turn. He stepped onto the stage, holding a champagne flute, flashing the easy smile that had once made me so proud. "Tonight," he began, "is about gratitude, about the people who shaped us. My father-in-law, Charles, has been a guiding light in my career. He taught me integrity, commitment, and vision." Applause rippled through the crowd. My fists clenched under the table. Daniel continued, "And to my own father." He paused, his eyes flicking toward me for the briefest moment. "You taught me to work hard, even when times were tough." A few polite laughs followed. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. Rachel gave a subtle nod. It was time. I stood slowly, pulling a thick brown envelope from my jacket pocket. The movement drew attention. Whispers stirred. I walked toward the stage, the sound of my shoes echoing against the marble floor. Daniel froze, his voice faltering mid-sentence. "Dad," he said, forcing a smile, "what are you doing?" "Something you should have done a long time ago," I said, climbing the short steps. My voice carried through the hall, calm but cutting, telling the truth. I placed the envelope on the podium. Inside are 3 contracts from Hayes Holdings. My company reopened under my name, forged with my signature, and used to funnel money through Melissa's firm. A murmur swept through the room. Cameras turned. Charles's face turned pale. Daniel tried to laugh, the sound brittle. "Dad, come on. This isn't the place." "Then where is the place, son?" I asked quietly. "After the IRS knocks on my door? After they drag my name through the mud for crimes I didn't commit?" Rachel stepped forward from the crowd, her press badge visible now. "Everything he's saying is true," she said firmly. "I've verified the filings, the bank transfers, the fake documents. It's all here." She raised her phone, screen glowing with evidence. Charles slammed his glass down. "Daniel, what the hell is this?" Daniel's mask cracked. "It's not what it looks like," he said, but his voice shook. "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," Rachel replied. "You used your father's business to move stolen money through Grant Development's accounts. That's fraud, Mr. Hayes." The room erupted gasps, whispers, the sound of chairs scraping back. Security moved forward, unsure of what to do. Charles stepped closer to Daniel, his voice low but venomous. You've embarrassed me in front of everyone. You're finished. Daniel looked at me, desperation flooding his eyes. Dad, please don't let them. I cut him off. My words quiet but heavy. You let this happen, Daniel. You did this to yourself. For a moment, I almost reached out to him, the instinct of a father who still wanted to protect his child. But then I remembered Ellen's photo on the mantel, her gentle warning about the cost of silence. I turned away. Rachel handed the documents to security, who escorted Daniel toward the exit. Cameras flashed as he passed, reporters whispering his name like vultures circling a wounded animal. Charles left without a word, his face white with rage. When the doors closed behind them, the ballroom fell into stunned silence. I stood alone on the stage for a moment, staring out at the faces watching me, some sympathetic, some judgmental. I cleared my throat. A father's pride is a powerful thing, I said softly. But so is his conscience. Tonight, I chose the latter. Then I stepped down, the echo of my footsteps the only sound left in the Golden Hall. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Grant development scandal. Son-in-law accused of corporate fraud. Beneath it was Daniel's photo, taken as security, escorted him out of the gala, his face pale and hollow under the harsh light of the cameras. I sat at the kitchen table, the paper open in front of me, the same cup of coffee growing cold beside my hand. The desert outside was silent, the sun just climbing over the horizon. I'd thought I would feel vindicated. Instead, all I felt was the ache of loss, quiet, steady, like a heartbeat under a bruise. By noon, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists, former co-workers, even old neighbors wanting to hear my side. I ignored them all. The only call I answered was from Rachel. They froze the accounts, she said. Grant's lawyers are cooperating. The state investigators want to talk to you, but you're in the clear. Your name's been officially removed from all filings. I exhaled slowly. So it's over? Rachel hesitated. For you? Yes. For him? Not even close. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. The house, suddenly too quiet again. I stared at Ellen's photo on the mantel. It's done, love, I whispered. But it doesn't feel like winning. That evening, just as the sky turned orange over the Nevada hills, a car pulled into my driveway. A familiar one, Daniel's old black sedan. I didn't move at first. I watched him sit there for a minute, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his shoulders shaking. Then, the car door opened. He looked smaller somehow, shrunken. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. There was no trace of the confident man from the gala, just my son broken, scared, and lost. Dad, he said, his voice cracking as he walked up the porch steps. Please, can we talk? I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. The air between us felt like a canyon. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. Melissa said we could handle it, that no one would ever find out. I crossed my arms. Melissa? He nodded miserably. She's gone. Her father kicked her out. She's blaming me for everything. So now you come here, I said quietly. After using my name, my business, my savings, after letting me think you were building a future, what is it you want, Daniel? He swallowed hard. I want a second chance. I'll make it right. I'll pay you back. I shook my head. You can't pay back what you took. He looked up, his voice rising. I was trying to make you proud. I wanted to show you I could be more than some mechanic's son, scraping by in Carson City. The words cut deep, but I kept my tone steady. I was proud, Daniel, of the man I thought you were, but you mistook wealth for worth. He stared at me, eyes glistening. You don't understand the pressure. You never had people expecting you to be perfect. I had a wife and a kid depending on me, I interrupted. I had 30 years underground in that mine to put food on our table. Don't talk to me about pressure. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For a long moment, there was only the sound of wind moving across the porch. Finally, He reached into his jacket and pulled something out a small velvet box. He set it on the porch rail and opened it. The Rolex gleamed under the fading sunlight. "It's worthless now," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Pawnshops won't even take it. I thought if I gave it back, maybe." I looked at the watch for a long time before answering. "That thing was never worth what you traded for it." He dropped his head, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I've lost everything." I nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time you start finding something real." He looked up, desperate. "Can I stay here? Just for a while?" I took a deep breath. Every part of me wanted to say yes, to be the father who saved him one more time. But Rachel's words echoed in my mind. "He'll never learn if you keep bailing him out." I stepped back, my hand on the door. "You need to learn how to stand on your own, Daniel. I can't help you do that." He flinched as if I'd struck him. For a second, I thought he might lash out, but instead, he just nodded. "I understand." He walked back to his car, the gravel crunching under his shoes. When the engine started, I turned away before he could see the tears in my eyes. Inside, I sat down beside the cold coffee, the house still and silent once more. Through the window, the last light of day touched the Rolex on the porch, glinting briefly before fading into dusk. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim or a father betrayed. I felt something else: relief. The kind that comes when you finally let go of the weight that was never yours to carry. The following week passed like a blur of quiet mornings and long nights. The town had already moved on to new gossip, new scandals, but inside my house, the air still felt heavy, filled with the echoes of that night on the porch. Daniel hadn't called since he drove away. Sometimes I caught myself glancing at my phone, half expecting his name to appear, half praying it wouldn't. Rachel came by on Thursday afternoon. She didn't say much at first, just set down a folder on the kitchen table and poured herself a cup of coffee, like she'd lived here her whole life. "It's time, Sam," she said finally. "You need to put your affairs in order. On your terms, this time." She slid a set of papers toward me. A new will, freshly drafted. I stared at the words on the page. My estate wasn't much: my modest house, the truck, the leftover savings, and what was left of my old repair equipment. But it was what Ellen and I had built together. It was everything that had survived the storms. Rachel spoke softly, not as a lawyer, but as a friend. "We'll establish a trust in Ellen's name. The Ellen Hayes Foundation. It'll go towards scholarships and training for young mechanics, kids who can't afford college but want to work with their hands. You'd be amazed how many out there just need a small start." Her words sank in slowly. Ellen had always believed in helping people find dignity through work. I could still hear her saying it the day we opened my old shop. "You don't build a life with fancy titles, Sam. You build it with your hands." I felt a lump rise in my throat. That's exactly what she would have wanted. Rachel nodded. "And as for Daniel," she hesitated, "you can leave a message if you want. A letter. Something to tell him what this all meant. I'll make sure it's delivered after." "After I'm gone," I finished for her, managing a faint smile. "Always thinking ahead, aren't you?" She smiled back, but her eyes were kind, not clever. "Someone has to." After she left, I sat alone with the documents. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Signing that paper meant closing the last open door between me and my son. But maybe that was what both of us needed, to stop pretending the door wasn't already shut. I signed my name slowly, the ink gliding steady and deliberate. Then I pulled a fresh sheet of paper from the pad on the table and began to write. "Daniel, if you're reading this, it means my time has come and gone. I don't know where life has taken you since that night, but I hope it took you somewhere honest. I used to think love meant forgiveness without limits. I gave you chance after chance, because that's what fathers do. But forgiveness without truth is just permission to keep destroying yourself. I can't give you that anymore. I want you to remember something your mother said once. The measure of a man isn't how high he climbs, but what he builds that lasts. I tried to live by that. Now I'm leaving behind something small, but solid, something for others to build on. The Ellen Hayes Foundation will help kids who remind me of who I once was. I hope one day you'll find it in your heart to do the same, to build, not take. If you ever wonder why I chose this path, it's simple. I'd rather my name be used to lift strangers than to excuse my own son's greed. Maybe that sounds harsh, but I write it with love, the kind that doesn't fade just because it hurts. I still believe there's a part of you that can change. You just have to stop looking for shortcuts to pride. Goodbye, Daniel. I hope one day you understand that this isn't punishment, it's a lesson. And if you learn it, you'll finally become the man your mother dreamed you'd be. Dad. When I finished, I read the letter twice, then folded it neatly and slid it into an envelope with his name on it. I placed it in the same drawer where Ellen used to keep our family photo albums. Outside, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of violet and gold across the desert sky. The air was cool, still, almost forgiving. I poured myself a small glass of whiskey and stepped out onto the porch. The world felt quieter now, as if the storm had passed. From somewhere down the road came the faint hum of an engine, a car heading toward the city, maybe toward a new beginning. I lifted the glass, not in anger or regret, but in a silent toast. To lessons learned, I murmured, even the hard ones. The wind rustled through the dry sagebrush, carrying Ellen's wind chime into motion. Its soft music filled the dusk, gentle and sad, but not hopeless. For the first time in a long while, I felt like she was listening. A year passed. Nevada's summer light fell softer that morning, brushing gold across the desert hills and the empty 2-lane road that led to the new Ellen Hayes Foundation Training Center. The building wasn't large, just a renovated workshop with clean white walls and the smell of machine oil and promise, but it was alive with the sound of young people learning. The clang of wrenches, the hum of engines, the low laughter of students who still believed in honest work. I stood at the entrance with a fresh plaque in my hands, its letters etched deep and simple. In memory of Ellen Hayes, for those who build with integrity. Rachel walked beside me, her hair tied back, her sunglasses hiding the pride she was too humble to admit. "It's official," she said. "You've done it." I smiled faintly. "We've done it." She shook her head. "You're the one who turned pain into purpose. That's not something lawyers can draft." Inside, the first group of trainees gathered around an old Ford engine, their hands covered in grease, their eyes shining with the same fire I once had when I was their age. Watching them, I felt something loosen in my chest, like the last thread of bitterness had finally let go. "Ellen would have loved this," Rachel said quietly. I nodded. "She's here," I said, looking toward the open garage door where sunlight poured in. Always was. We walked outside, where the desert stretched wide and endless. A gentle breeze carried the scent of sage and warm sand. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Rachel said softly, "Have you heard from him?" I didn't have to ask who she meant. "Once," I said. "A postcard. No return address. Just 3 words, 'I'm trying, Dad.'" Her smile was sad but hopeful. "That's something." "It is," I said, my voice quiet. "Maybe the start of something real." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old watch I'd worn since my mining days, a simple silver piece that ticked a little slow but never stopped. I looked at it for a moment, then fastened it around my wrist. "Time's funny," I said. "You spend years thinking you can make up for it. But the truth is, all you can do is use what's left the right way." Rachel looked at me with that knowing half-smile of hers. "So what now, Mr. Hayes?" I gazed at the horizon, where the mountains met the sun, a shimmer of heat rising between them. "Now," I said, "now I live. Not for what I lost, but for what I've learned." We sat on the wooden bench outside the workshop, as the students' laughter drifted through the open doors. The wind played with the dust at our feet, the air humming with quiet peace. I thought about Daniel wherever he was and hoped he'd finally found a place that didn't depend on lies to stand tall. Maybe someday, when he was ready, he'd come see this place. Maybe he'd walk through those doors, smell the engine grease, and remember who he used to be before pride turned him hollow. And if that day came, I'd be here not to forgive what was done, but to welcome the man he'd finally become. The sun was sinking low now, painting the desert in hues of copper and rose. I lifted my face toward the light, feeling its warmth on my skin, the quiet of a life rebuilt from ashes. Rachel rose, brushing the dust from her skirt. "You ready to go, Sam?" "Not yet," I said, smiling. "Just want to watch the sunset a while longer." She nodded and walked toward the truck. I stayed seated, listening to the wind sweep across the Nevada plains, the distant echo of laughter from inside the workshop, and the steady ticking of my old watch, a rhythm of peace, of lessons earned, of love that survived truth. As the last rim of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains, I whispered to the fading light, "We did it, Ellen." And for the first time in years, I felt completely free. True redemption doesn't come from punishing those who wronged you, but from choosing integrity over bitterness. Sometimes the greatest act of love is stepping back and building something that outlasts the pain.